it's 17 years, as they already told you, and kind of really think the meaning of all of this. I really sorry. I'll apologize in advance because, of course, I will commit some English mistakes and perhaps even some mistakes in what I'm going to expose you. But I am asking your apologies, and I'll try to be. I'll try to bring up some ideas quite interesting for you to think about. If I'm successful in what I want to do, you're gonna leave this room tonight, hopefully with good feelings in your hearts, but also with new ideas in your minds about Spiritism and about our mission in Earth. Okay. So, well, this idea came up to my mind, I think, about 2 years ago. I was in vacation in summer, and when you're on vacation, and you have to take the kids and take to the playground the kids and bring back and concern about lunch. And then I was hanging out somewhere and think about how many people there are in the world right now. Let's say the figure is 7.6 billion people who are the Earth population. Okay, and I had an idea, the kind of question that we Spiritists like to ask. It's not. What is that? It's not. I think it isn't.
Really focus.
Okay, now it goes. Well, so let's talk a little bit, or let's recall the concept of reincarnation. Okay, see, this work is not about reincarnation. Reincarnation is a fact. I don't come here to argue about reincarnation or to concern about case studies on reincarnation, people who report previous lives or so. I'm pretty convinced about that, and hopefully most of you guys are convinced, and those who are not convinced will get eventually convinced. Okay, this is not the point of the talk. So let's just recall. It's a base of Spiritism doctrine. Okay, no reincarnation, you don't have Spiritism doctrine. You might have very good and honorable spiritualisms, which are good by themselves, by their own, but it is not Spiritism. So what is reincarnation all about? We pass through this material life several times, many times, few times. Well, what is many, what is few? But at least a couple of times. And it's a law of nature. Okay, so it's not that you choose to reincarnate or you choose not to reincarnate. Eventually, we learn from the Spiritism that when we get to a certain level of evolution, we are able to choose, okay, now I can go because I don't have anything that too much bad in my past, and then I can kind of manage the way I'm gonna do from now on. But for the most of the time, mainly when you are still in the very beginning, we don't really choose. We have to go. We have to go like you are like a motion that we cannot resist. Okay, matter attracts the spirit. Matter attracts the spirit that hasn't got yet to a certain level of evolution to incarnate and to reincarnate. So it has to do with free will, but it goes far beyond. And nothing is by chance, as we like to say also in Spiritism. Okay, everything fits quite well within a larger divine plan that we barely grasp to understand. This huge divine plan. Now I have these questions. I'm quite sure anyone who has already studied something about Spiritism and reincarnation asked himself this question. Okay? Let's not even consider about the Christian era. This is just a technicality that I had to introduce. But who never thought about, well, how many lives did I have? How many lives have you had or you had? So it's a quite reasonable question if you are a reincarnationist, okay? But I'm going to change the question here. How many years have we had incarnated on Earth? Instead of asking how many lives I have, oh, I had 5 lives. Let's say I was incarnated by a total of, I don't know, 200 years, summing up all these lives. It's a different way of look at the thing. It's almost the same thing, but it's not the same thing, okay? So we have this question on how many lives, and question 2, how many years on the whole we had incarnated. Now the bad and the good news. First question, no way, at least not for me. Second question, see, and I'm gonna try to show you in the next 30 or 40, 45 minutes how this can be done, at least theoretically. Well, let's just talk a little bit more in the concept. So we are used to think that we had many lives, as many as we need, but we have to be careful here, because this kind of idea, as like many ideas that we hear about, is not to say that, okay, because if I will have as many lives as I need, then I can just I can just keep doing some kind of mistake and not concern about my evolution, doing something wrong, and I'll have another chance. Yeah, you have another chance to fix things, but this chance can take much more time than you think. Maybe it is not just straightforward. Maybe you don't just like waste this life and you have a new life right after. And why so? Because we have heard that there are many, many spirits waiting for the opportunity to reincarnate. So this time you are here is very, very important. We must be really convinced about this. Another thing, we're going to talk about a little mathematics here, okay? But we have we do not pretend, of course, that everything is mathematical. We're going to bring mathematics and kind of mixed up with some spiritist concepts. But of course, I'm a mathematician, but I do not believe, I'm sure, spirits is not mathematics, okay? So just to make it clear, it's not the way I think. I don't think that spirits will eventually be written down as a kind of mathematical formula. I don't think so. That will never happen. But just to make sure, again, in the second question, now look at the difference. A person had a lifespan of 60 years, probably in some vague sense, had more opportunities to learn, and we are here to learn, than the one person that died at 15 years old. That does not mean that we can measure as a ratio, that the first person learned 4 times as more as the second. So we are not doing this kind of thing here. But it is reasonable to say that the first person had more chance to learn than the second. Okay, just that. Now let's take a sample. So I'm taking the spirit of study. The reason to take the period like the Christian era that starts at the year where Christ came up to today, 2019 years. Let's say 2000 years, okay, for simplicity. And let's take the example of spirit of Paul. Let's say, so I'm just figuring that Paul had 3 lives in this period of 2019 years. Let's say that he lived from, sorry, I think it's become kind of small font over there, 413, the year 413 through 460. So he was born in 413 and he died in 460 in this first life. So he lived 47 years at that time. And then he had a second chance where he was born in 912 and he died in the year 957. So he lived 45 years. And he had a third time where he was born in 1909 and he was deceased in 1990. So he lived 81 years. So the first question for Paul would be answered. He had 3 lives. how would you answer the second question for Paul? Remember, the second question is the total time Paul was incarnated. Just take and sum up the number of years he lived in each one of his lives. So we make a quick computation, 172 years. Keep that this is the information we are looking for. So not really too much about the number of lives, but the number of years. We need to understand that so that we can get to the next step and understand how the computation could be done. We would say that the spirit of Paul in this period has an incarnated time. We had to kind of to create a concept of incarnated time of 173 years. Right. So let's pick up a couple different examples. We know that spirits don't need to have the same number of lives or of incarnated years. Some spirits had more chance in terms of number of lives. Some others have less lives. Okay, so it could be something completely different from one spirit to the other. Okay, but here we have, let's say, 5 spirits, and each one with his, let's say, incarnation history or incarnation background in the Christian era. Now, eventually I go back to the slide, but let's assume that Clara had an incarnated time of 321 years, Paul 172 years, Madira 245 years, Lee 180, Aisha 72 years. What is an average? So we all know what's an average, or have some idea. Averages are very important because everything comes up through the news, through the science, in terms of averages, like the mean. So it's a mathematical concept, but well, we all eventually gotta finish our elementary school or middle school or high school, and we had some grades, and at some point there was an average. So everybody knew at some point what an average is. You know that eventually you got, I don't know, in a scale of 10, you got 6 in one exam, and then you got 8 in the other exam, and you got an average of 7. Okay, so I hope everyone is more or less familiar with that. So just to illustrate, in this case, we are computing the average incarnated time of these 5 spirits, summing up all his incarnated times and divided by the number of spirits. So keep in mind, what comes in the numerator of the fraction is the sum of incarnated times. What comes in the denominator is the number of spirits. The number of spirits. So for this particular case, we have 198.2, actually, now it should be 0.2 years. Now, it's something that you also know. Let's say that the average of your second high school year in your class in a math exam was 5 out of 10. What does that mean? Everybody's got 5 at the exam? No. Maybe a half of the class got 10, the other half got 0. Okay? All right? If a half of the class got 10 and the other half got 0, the average was 5. Other possibility. 1/3 got 10 and the other 2/3 got how much? How many? To average to be 5. So maybe 3. 3. Something like that. Probably not 3, but close. So we have to be careful with that. Okay? Now, how to compute it? Then we go back to this slide. That's just like a pictorial exposition of the incarnate times. What I did here was the following. These are the same spirits we are studying. But instead of considering several lives for Clara, I just kind of bring all them together in a single bar that describes the whole time Clara was incarnated. Mathematically, there's no problem because at the end, I'm proposing to sum up all the lifetimes, all the incarnated lifetimes. So if Clara had 7 lives and the sum up was 321, I can just consider, for the sake of the computation, that she has only 1 life where she lived 321. From the point of view of mathematics, it doesn't make any difference, okay? Do the same thing for Paul, Mahdi, Ali, Aisha. Just to make a little more simple here, the picture. Now, pick up all these bars, which account for the whole incarnate time of each spirit, and put in this picture, and just think a little bit. If I read this graph in horizontal lines, I'm getting the number of incarnated years of a particular spirit. But if I read this graph through the vertical lines, what do I get? Say we are in year 517. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's saying how many of these spirits were incarnated in that year. So summing up, what we had is the area of the graph. The area of this whole thing here is the same. I can sum first along the horizontal lines and then sum up each horizontal line. Or I can sum up in the vertical lines and then summing throughout the years. And the conclusion is the following. If we sum up the incarnate times for all spirits, it's the same as summing up the incarnate population for all times. Because if you choose any one year, let's say the year 1320, Middle Ages, and you count how many people were in Earth in that year, the population of Earth in that year, and you sum all this up, and you do this for all years from the first year up to 2019, you get the same thing. I'm sure you know. You get the same thing, don't you, Adrian?
Yeah, that's right.
That if you just sum in the horizontal lines and the historical incarnate time of every spirit. Now, we don't have the historical incarnate time of every spirit. I don't have my history of years. I don't know how many years I incarnated in the Christian era. No one of us know that. It's as hard to answer this question as to say how many lives we had. But we know the population of Earth. How do we know that? Science. Let's say state-of-art science. Okay? But we have to be careful. Of course, we know with great precision the population of Earth in this year, past year, 2 years ago. But when you go far to the past, of course, things don't get that easier. But let's go ahead. I have done the computation, of course, but I want you guys to think about what do you think should be this average. So let's get back to the question. The main question I'm going to answer in a couple of slides, probably next slide. I want to compute the average incarnate time of spirits on Earth. It's just a fraction. Divide one number by the other number. Both numbers are quite big. The first number that comes above is the sum of incarnate times of all spirits of Earth, which is the sum of the populations from year 1 through year 2090. The year that goes underneath, below is the denominator, is the number of spirits we assume there are on the spiritual population of Earth. So we can, if you try to guess this, make some reasonable assumptions. For instance, we can deal with the average lifespan. What's the average lifespan? Then I have two things to tell you. For most of history, the average lifespan, you guys know, was kind of pretty 35, 40 years. People used to die quite often. Most people die not older than 40 years old. Up to the 17th, 18th century. Okay? Very few people would get to 50 years or 70 years old at that time. No? But if you take from end of 19th century, maybe 20th century, then the average lifespan grew a lot, so to 70, 80 years or so. Okay, and even now it's even more. In many countries, it gets to 90 years, and there's the distinction between men and women that also people know that they have different average lifespans. But let's talk a little bit about the Spiritist literature. You guys have heard about Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco, and they have written many books that report trajectories of spirits who had, let's say, 5, 7, 10 lives in these 2,000 years. Actually, there's a book which is very respectful that says that Chico Xavier himself had 7 years 7 lives, sorry, had 7 lives since the first century of this era, of Christian era. There's this other book here. It's called Eustáquio. I was surprised to find it, written by the spirit Carbachuto, where he says that the spirit of Eustáquio had 17 lives since the Middle Ages. Okay, of course, some of these lives could have been quite short. Maybe he died when he was a baby or a little child, but in many others, he got to be a man. I mean, or woman. He got to 30 or 40 or 50 years old. Okay. Now let's see. Here's the answer we have. Summing up all these populations, we got 1.36 trillion of incarnated years. Now, how many spirits are on Earth? Well, this kind of trick. But Emmanuel, which was the mentor of Chico Xavier, one of the most close mentors of Chico Xavier, said that there are about 21 billion spirits. So the rate of this number by this one gives 64.7 years. Okay, so I don't know what you thought. Maybe someone, probably 150 years, 300 years, 500 years. I would guess that most of you had a picture, a number in your mind that was probably a 3-digit number. Some of them 300, some of them 600 years. Okay, but this is the number we get, 64.7 years. What do you think about this? So I ask you, too low, right? This is precisely the impression that I myself had. And I tell you, I went to the beginning of, no, let's do it again. There must be a mistake. And I did it again from the beginning to the end. Then I did it a second time, a third time. Okay, let's do another way. Mathematicians like to do that. The same computation, since we know that the order of the terms don't change the sum. Let's do it from the back to the beginning. So we started from here and summing up. Eventually, no, let's do some clever. We elaborate a pretty small C program, the computer, and you put it there. So let's not even do the dirty work. Let's do the computer do the work, and just prepare a kind of a file where you put all these numbers of the population of Earth for each one of these years. So let's the computer do it. And we didn't get anything different after do the ratio from that. Of course, you can say, well, but how can we know, or how can you know the population of Earth in the second year of the Christian era? Because today is kind of, there are many ways to know. People are, but at that time, well, that's not part of my work. The work was, well, there's this information somewhere. Let's go to ask science. Anthropologists, historians, people who are on the subject, who have written scientific papers, which were accepted by journals, by responsible journals, and see what they say. Now, just to give you the idea of how I did it, there's a large bunch at the United Nations, a large, a directory in the United Nations webpage where they have this information. So I looked from official web page of the United Nations. It's not something that came out of the blue or out of my mind. It's not just a guess of myself. It's very reliable scientific information. Okay, this one here, you can think, well, it's Emmanuel's opinion. This is a very people really trust what he say for most of the time, but he could also be wrong. No one is perfect. Maybe he brought a wrong information. But see, the thing is, in order to raise this number, let's play a little bit the numbers. This is the denominator of a fraction. In order to raise this number, the only way to do, if the numerator is the same, would be to diminish these 21 billions. And if you diminish a lot, you don't get something much better than that. You won't increase it that much. Also because we believe that not all spirits are incarnated right now. Okay, we don't think so. Actually, it's much more likely that most spirits of the Earth population are disincarnated right now. We are a small fraction of the spiritual world. We who are incarnated right now. So probably there are more spirits non-incarnated than incarnated. So to the best, we could diminish this number up to maybe 15 billion, which is twice 7.5 billion to the best. And if you diminish this number to 15 billion, this number goes no more than 100 years, maybe 90 something years, 90, 92, still too low, too low. So how can you work this out? How can you work this out to accommodate our previous conceptions about several lives, many opportunities? And this is the hard part of the task. But we have something to say. I would like you guys to think first about it. How can that be possible? Of course, there might be mistakes. No one is perfect. I'm not perfect. I did mistakes, of course. Okay. But the computations, as I told you, were done and redone several times. And most important, we wrote a paper that we submitted. It had just been accepted by this Jornal de Estudos Espíritas. It's a Brazilian journal that publishes articles with content in Spiritism. Okay, and the importance that it follows the standards of science. So the paper was reviewed. They call it peer-reviewed by specialists in physics, in mathematics, but who are also knowledgeable in Spiritism. So the people who reviewed the computations were people who know what we are talking about in the deep. And they didn't find mistakes in the computation so far. Other people who are not related to the journal, but who are also experts in physics and mathematics, good friends of mine, and who are spiritists, I present the results to him. They were astounded with them, but they look at it and they didn't find mistakes, at least in the computations. Population historical data, like I told you, so many of them are estimates, but they are surveyed by experts. So I'm not an expert in these areas of knowledge, but I will give the credit to them, to those people who are experts, okay? Now, an interesting thing is that we did a kind of a pretty quick interview, a couple of friends from Spiritist groups in Ribeirão Preto. And they found, I mean, let's say I collected, what's your opinion, how much, after I explained what I was looking for, which number I was looking for, so it's not the number of lives, but the number of incarnated years. I asked, I think about 20, 22 people who were studying Spiritism for a couple of years, not people who had just beginners. And they, based on their knowledge and what they thought, I say, feel free to do to pick up any number you like. Doesn't need to have a reasonable explanation. Look, I was not looking for a formula or a mathematical reasoning. You could use that, but just bring up from your intuition. There's just one person among 20 persons who gave something close to our computation. In the very first group that we interviewed. And he gave out of the blue, and he told me after that, well, I just thought about this number, but I don't have any reason. It just came to my mind. He gave 70. All other people gave 100, 200, 300, 500, and the average that they gave was 625 years of age. Well, this number is several times the 64.7 you just got. Okay? But there's some more math we can do that. Okay? Now, we are going away from the average. I don't expect that possibly most of you will manage that. But this is very standard mathematics in the field of probability, statistics and probability. It's called the normal distribution, the Gaussian curve. Okay? And you assume the form of the distribution as a Gaussian, we can say even more. If you know the average and if you know the dispersion, then you can put this kind of estimate here. 76.3% of spirits, more than 2/3, had an incarnated time lesser than 86 years. Okay? And 13% of the spirits had an incarnated time between 86 years and 107 years. Okay? And only 0.15% of spirits had an incarnated time more than 129 years. So let's pick the first line here. Let's round it down to 2/3. Let's say that 2/3 of spirits had less than 86.3 years. Keep this number in mind. We are all young, okay? We are pretty young. But I tell you, if this figure is right, most of us are in the second incarnation. In the second. Just think a little bit. I'm 45 years old. No problem with my age. I'm 45. So if I'm 45 years old, I lived more time in this incarnation, and I'm in this group. If I am 45 years old, and if I fit in this group, I lived more of my incarnate time in this Christian era, in this life, because my previous life had at most 40 years, at most. You see, so these numbers and these figures are kind of disturbing for our previous conception of several lives and several opportunities and so. Okay?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
So you said that right now you have 21 billion spirits.
21 billion, right.
And the Earth, we have 6 billion, right?
Seven,
So in your calculation, you're considering, for example, that probably some spirits did not incarnate so far, you know what I mean?
exactly. We went precisely that way. That was the thing that we are trying to find out, to manage with all these numbers, to get a way for us to understand everything that we had before. But not but let's okay, see, when you talk about an average, so go back to the picture of the classroom, of the examinations, the 2 or 3 examinations of a particular math or English or whatever, in which some people get some people perform pretty good in the examination, the others go pretty bad, and the average is more or less neither too good, neither too bad. Okay, maybe this is the case. Some spirits incarnate much more than the average. Other spirits incarnate much less than the average. Probably this is the case. That was our first, how to say, the first thing we grabbed to not drown this. Okay, to not get completely um, um, unsure about everything you had learned before. Okay. So I already said something about this first item. And I have to recall you, this works on essay on matter spiritism, okay? And of course, we looked, and other people also looked for flaws, for mistakes, and we got to this. This is also our thought about how to solve this problem. 3 possible scenarios. What are these 3 possible scenarios? First scenario, the whole spiritual population has been reincarnated, everybody more or less the same. Okay, so as most people really had 64.7 years of incarnate time. That's basically what the first scenario says. The second scenario, only a fraction of the spiritual population reincarnates. So let's say that, imagine the whole set of spirits. Imagine that this whole set is divided in 2 subsets. A small subset, maybe not so small, but a subset of spirits who often reincarnate, in the complementary subset of spirits who never or almost never incarnate. That could be the case. And there's this third scenario here, mass reincarnation in recent history. Okay?
There's a fourth one.
A fourth? Oh, tell me, because I don't know.
Emmanuel reported 21 billion people.
Yeah.
But he never said these 21 spirits were here since from the beginning. Maybe they migrate from other planet.
Good.
In middle of the
Pretty good.
1500, something like that.
Yeah.
So in the first 1500, the population on Earth was very, very low.
Reincarnating on another place.
In other planet.
It could be the case, right?
Here, more recently.
That could be the case. Actually, we thought about that when we were writing this work, and we had kind of scapegoat. I don't know if that's the anyway, whatever. I read that in a math book once and I liked it, but maybe it's not right to say the thing is, I don't believe so. But I'm going to tell you why I do not believe so. Do you know the book A Caminho da Luz? Surely you know. A Caminho da Luz is a book written by Emmanuel. where he reports the transmigration of spirits from different planets to Earth. But the four main civilizations that he reported were civilizations before Christ. He didn't say anything about after Christ up to today. Might be migration. It could be. It could be some migration. But he himself didn't report. And we did estimates with the computer program that we developed. It's a pretty simple, just like you automate the obvious computations. We did some simulations, assuming you say, how many spirits would have been migrated coming from somewhere else or going to somewhere else in order to raise that number. We figured that if 10 million spirits, say, migrate, it almost doesn't change anything. Because we are talking about a couple million spirits compared to 20, 21, or 25 billion spirits. So the difference of magnitude is like just 1,000. So when you do the computation, it changes only the decimal place of the number. It doesn't really change the main figure. So we are kind of confident about that. We did many simulations, trying to pick up the mistakes from any side they could come, and we could not find. But it's a very good point. Thanks for remembering, because I was about to talk about, but I forgot. So it's good that you point this out. Okay, let's just go into the end of our presentation. And okay, I already talked about, okay, this one here, that gives the 64.7 number. This second one is a computation very similar to the first one. The only difference is that instead of taking 21 billion as the number, I took, say, a smaller number. But which smaller number? What is the population that is supposed to reincarnate? Then you got to the following point. You agree with me, Edmar, that if I'm gonna assume that a smaller number of spirits, and only that smaller number is reincarnating, this number has to be at least 7.5. Okay? And since it has to be at least 7.5, we got to the first a couple slides back that don't get that much higher. So this one is 64.7, and the second one, we did the computation in the paper, I just don't recall the number. It's about 90 something, 92, 93 years of incarnate time. So let's get this third one. This is a little bit more complicated. How does that work? So let's assume that a small part of the spirits of the whole 21 billion population did reincarnate, and only that part of the population from 1 to a near T-naught. But T-naught is not 2019. It's some year in the past. But at year T-naught, all spirits start reincarnating gradually. Okay? So today we assume that all spirits are somehow reincarnated. Not only the small population that had privileged from the year 1 to year T-naught. And then we make, well, mathematicians, when they don't know how to explain something, they pick up the most simple function ever, linear function. Fx equals a times x plus b. So, and with this linear function, again, with our computational model, a pretty simple algorithm allows us to figure the T-naught and also the population that is reincarnating up to that year. And it got stable. Now is the time to guess. I mean, is the time you can feel comfortable with your number you first at the beginning. Let's say that, oh, I think that what seems reasonable is that people who are reincarnating more often, they incarnate an average of 300 years. If you think that people have incarnated 300 years, the small population that reincarnates is 300 years in the whole incarnated, then the mass reincarnation started somewhere between 1912 and 1974. But I think that, let's say, people from my friends from Ribeirão Preto, they think that is 625 years. 625 years should be the figure. Then the mass reincarnation starts somewhere between 1732 and 1907. Now, you guys know that this 18, 19, up to 20th century was the great population blow. So everything we are doing is somehow trying to fit in the Spiritist picture, but also is completely compatible with mathematical demographic data, which is scientifically achievable. So that was pretty much the point of this work. Now here I forgot to say, and here you have a column that says what was, if let's say we take this number, what was the incarnated in population from the beginning? Something between 1.4 and 1.7 billion. Again, let's say that okay, these are three scenarios. The reason to write three scenarios, I was very clear in the paper. I don't want to push anyone to you guys, or whoever ever reads the paper. You choose the scenario you find the most interesting. Maybe you think the first scenario is fine. If you think the first scenario is fine, stick with it, no problem. If you think the second scenario is the better, you stay with that. If you think the third is the better. So I gave you different options to manage your knowledge in Spiritism, the knowledge of the facts, and also the mathematical treatment. You choose what you think is the right one. I won't say you. Of course, I have a preferable one in my own, but I won't say, okay? Now, let's say that we are talking still about this third scenario. This is the third scenario. And you get, say, 300. Let's say that the average should be 300. The mass reincarnation started in this period, okay? Probably in the first half of the 20th century. And the incarnated population was 3.74, let's say 4. If this line is the right one, today we have 7.6 billion spirits incarnated, but only 4 incarnated from the beginning. How many have been incarnated since this time? 3.6. So nearly half of the population today had 300 years of incarnate time. The other half had barely no year of incarnate time. Do you see what's the meaning of these numbers? Okay, let's pick up this line here. Let's say that my friends from Liberato were actually close to the right figure. Then the population was about, let's say 2. Let's round up to 1.2. Let's say 2 billion people are reincarnated. Well, if 2 billion people reincarnate from the beginning, but now we have 7.6, so we have 5.6 billion spirits who didn't have that many, so many chance to reincarnate. Then 2 out of 7, say that, let's say for each out of 7 people you get out there, 5 have had no chance to reincarnate, or barely no chance, maybe 1 very, very little chance to reincarnate. 5 out of 7. Think it's just a lot of people out there. Why out there? Inside here. Because we do not pretend we are in the small group that we're privileged. Why should you think so? Don't know. We don't know. So be careful. Think about a lot, okay? Meditate on this. Be careful how you take this, okay? Reason, as I always say, I like to say, reason is very important, but it's not the whole thing. There is something that goes a little beyond. Now, there is something interesting. First, why I myself chose this period starting from the year of the born of Christ. There are a couple of reasons, but let's say just 2 main reasons. The first one is that the farther you go to the past, the less you know about precise information on the population. So in order to do some kind of reliable computation with my population data, okay, the more I go to the past, I get more mistakes. So I prefer to stick from year 1 of the Christian year up to the present. Okay, there's another thing. Of course, Christ is a landmark, like something that divides history. And his coming has a very important meaning to us, not only in the religious sense, but in the life on earth. And then think the following. The spirits who had not incarnated in Christian era, they did not have contact while incarnate. They may have in the spiritual world, but not incarnate with the teachings of Jesus Christ and Muhammad. Let's not forget Muhammad. Christianity is the first or the second. I never know. If you take Christianity and Islam, you probably get 2/3 of mankind. Maybe more. We know that, okay? 2/3 of mankind are either Christian or Islam. And few people know that in the Muslim, the first prophet of Islam is Muhammad, 5th century, 6th century. The second prophet of Islam is Jesus Christ. It's very interesting to point this out. Okay, so respect all religions because all of them have the important things, the core. But these so things that we have to think about and never forget. Spiritual doctrine, love and education. Okay, love yourselves and educate yourself or instruct yourself. So think the following. There might be, of course, several reasons why a small group sticking with this scenario. Okay, a small group incarnated more, and the other bigger group came sometime after. You have to figure out the reasons. We had a hard time to think about which could be the reasons, but I also led to you to think about. Or you take the paper and take a look, and then you have some hints. But one thing that we learned since we entered Spiritism is that we have to love and to educate. What are we doing on earth now? We are educating. And we have to receive the people. We have to manifest our love. Let it flow. Let receive. People are not, there's a lot of diversity in the world. Have you ever thought of why there is so much diversity? So much weird things. I mean, we think, the other guy doesn't think he's weird, but we think he's weird. Maybe one of these two people who find the other very strange, one of them is from the first group, the other for the other group. That's all right, because eventually we'll get to understand each other, to accept, and even to love each other. We have to force ourselves to make this love. The movement has to start on ours because we know the Christ's message. The other who doesn't know, it's his problem. But if you are, or if you think we are without presumptions, one bit more, we have to do the first step. We have to give the first step. Okay? So I think this is a very important point for us to keep in mind. Love, educating, thinking about, okay? And receiving all people. We must receive people. I'm not saying in this group, but without, out of this group, out of this room, people are different. You have to receive them. If you know Christ, it's your moral obligation. It's a moral obligation. Okay? You are doing a great job if you do that. You gotta do that. So I told in the beginning, okay, so I'm really happy to be here. And I wish the best for all of you. The light of God can shine in your hearts, bring you peace, enlightenment, confidence. You gotta be confident about yourselves. You're gonna go out there, you're gonna do your best, and you feel very happy about that. Bring people in the right way, because you are too smart, man. You are clever. You know how to do that. You have social skills. Use them. Okay? Talk the language that people can understand. If they understand English, you talk in English. You understand Portuguese, Spanish, you talk in the other languages. Culturally too. You know, talking to the culture of the people, if you know that. Okay, bring them together, hug them. Vibrate love to them. Respect them, tolerate them. Be kind to them, but not this kind of like just fake kind. Be really kind from the bottom of your heart. Okay? And you feel very good about that. And I really hope that you do the things that you feel good, and may God bless all of us. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.